Hi guys, we've been having quite a lot of fun with our cavalry games over the last couple of weeks, so we decided to finish this series with a big one. This is a replay of one of the scenarios from the Two Fat Lardies magazine that support General d'Armée, and this is of the cavalry attacks at Waterloo. It's one of the scenarios by Dave Brown, and it does give the French slightly more chance because it allows all those armchair generals to have their wish and bring some battalions forward from Jerome and d'Erlon's corps in support of the massed cavalry attacks that took place in mid-afternoon. So what we've got on the table here today is two French heavy cavalry forces, a brigade/division here of two regiments of dragoons and one regiment of chasseurs. This is a large regiment, 8 bases of chasseurs there, and they're all large regiments of dragoons as well, 7 or 8 bases strong. So that's 24 figures, 21 to 24 figures for all of those units. Then we've got some slightly smaller units in the second heavy cavalry division. We've got 2 more regiments of chasseurs and 2 regiments of carabiniers, and we have a horse artillery battery also in support. The French will get, and we'll move them up onto the table next once these units have started moving forward, 2 brigades of French infantry, and they also have the heavy infantry batteries off table in support, so able to fire at long range. Now facing off against those today, we have elements of the British line to the left of La Haison. So we've got a brigade of Brunswickers here, the 3 line battalions tucked behind these trees, supported by a brigade of Brunswicker cavalry, the Hussars and the Lancers. Do particularly like the Brunswick Lancers. It did get a bit tedious painting all that black, and I'm never very happy how all my Brunswickers turn out. I think I needed more contrast in those. But anyway, let's move on, see what else we've got. The rest of the British line here, so we've got the 95th and 95th Rifles Battalion and a foot artillery battery around this hedge line. The hedge line marks the crest of the hill, so anything behind the hedge line is invisible to the French artillery unless it moves forward, and only their horse artillery will be able to. So we've got the 95th there in the centre. We've got the 52nd, a large regiment slightly in reserve on the down slope of the hill there, behind the crest. And then we have the 71st Scottish Light, also behind the crest. This gun battery is forward of the crest. I'll push it forward a little bit more in a second just to finish off the deployment. I didn't get that quite right when I put them down. Let's walk around the table. And then the British have some further cavalry regiments. So we've got a regiment here of veteran light dragoons and also some remnants of the heavy cavalry brigade. So we're using a small regiment of household to represent those remnants of the elite British brigade that expended itself in the assault against d'Erlon's corps. And then we got a regiment of British Hussars and British light dragoons. And then the British have their own horse artillery battery here on the right hand side. So we have played this scenario once before, and I played it on a 10 by 4 table, and that made it very difficult for the British. The 2 British infantry formations found it almost impossible to cover the frontage of the ridge to allow the French to gang up on them and take out one wing then the other. So from memory, I think the French had a pretty strong victory in that one. So we've tried it with a more compressed frontage and gone for more like a 6 by 6 layout here today. So let's see how we get on. So we'll kick off by starting and rolling for initiative at the beginning of turn 1. Enjoy the game, and as always, remember to leave some comments, let us know what you think. Suggestions for features and scenarios are always good. I have had plenty of feedback about my carabiniers since they've been appearing again. And I think you're probably right. I think they probably should not be in the sky blue. They should be in white. So the couple of the sources I was using when I was painting them, which are usually very reliable, I was using a mixture of Elting and Cottles pictures of all of the hundreds of paintings, not all did, of Napoleonic uniforms. Absolutely fabulous books, and did have them. At least one of those plates is in their sort of second line uniforms, their working uniforms, and has them in this pale blue. And I also have that in the Les Saint-Jean website, which again is another great reference for the 100th Day uniforms, also has them in this uniform. However, I've been doing some more research recently and looking up in some more of my books I've got. And indeed, one of those, and apologies, I can't remember, I think it's Napoleonic Uniforms, it might be called, which does a lot of research in terms of what material was issued to all of the units. And that one both says that they didn't have any of this light blue material issued to them in 1815, and indeed the colouring was only introduced after the 100 days, those colour uniforms. So they may be wrong, but hey, they still look good in sky blue. And I've got so much painting to do with all my Russians at the moment, I think it'll be a while before I choose whether or not I'm going to repaint those. So please forgive me if they're slightly inaccurate, but they'll still be hopefully just as effective on the table. All right, let's crack on, as I said, turn one. Okay, so the British rolled a 10, and despite having a couple of hesitant brigades, they gained initiative for turn one. The British had the hesitant brigades because they went for artillery assault on the central battery here and used 3 ADCs to make sure that, or try and make sure that came off, which indeed it has, but didn't have any rerolls. So a couple of their cavalry brigades on the right are indeed hesitant this turn, but I'm not expecting too much movement from them. For the French, all of their units are active, so let's expect them to move forward. Let's crack on. We'll do movement, probably not much for the Allies, and we'll move the French. Cheers. Okay, so no movement on the Allies left as the Brunswickers stay in position. In the centre, again the light brigade staying where it is, although the British skirmishers, you might be able to just see them there now behind the 71st Light. They've pulled back from screening their own guns. Don't want to be ridden down by the French cavalry. And a lot of movement for the French. So Rye's 1st Brigade has started moving on the table down here behind its own skirmish screen. The 2 heavy cavalry divisions, brigades, have moved forward towards the Allied lines. Another French brigade appearing down here, and I've been able to deploy it onto the table. They will be able to fire without a deployment penalty. There was just no space, so I've also now placed down the French heavy artillery batteries, the 12-pounders and 6-pounders, that'll open fire on the Allies' line. But it'll be Allies to fire first, so let's kick off with the British with their artillery assault, and they'll probably have a go firing against these approaching dragoons. Okay, so opening fire with this British gun battery. Let's see how we do. We roll a 6 at long range and then nothing on the casualty dice. So I don't believe that will only be anything. Half a casualty possibly against the dragoons. Let's roll, see if we get that. We do. First casualty of the game. The dragoons take their first casualty. And we'll roll for some bounce through as to whether it hits that cuirassier regiment behind as well. It does. So 1 casualty on both of them. That's that first battery fired. The second battery we will do at the same time. Before we mark those 2 casualties up, they will go at the 3rd Dragoon Regiment. This will be at long range, no artillery dice. And a 4 at long range does no damage. And then finally we have nestled behind those trees a British horse artillery battery. They will also open fire against the dragoons at long range. And they do a 3, so they do nothing other than a fatigue casualty to themselves. Alright, I think that's it for turret firing at for the Allies. Back with the French. Okay, so these 2 French heavy batteries here, they're in reality a little bit further back. They're opening fire from a small ridge behind the French position, and they'll be firing at long range, counter battery fire, so this will be a -2 against the central British battery. They roll a 5, which will be a fatigue casualty at -2, and a 9. That might be something. That's a 7 at long range, is half a casualty against the British artillery battery. Let's see if it converts. It doesn't. So lots of long range artillery fire to no great effect as we finish. Turn 1, we'll be back for turn 2. Okay, in turn 2 we made similar decisions. So the British again have decided to go for artillery assault. That's the 266s. To remind me, sitting on that battery in the centre. They took that risk, and as a result their 2 right-hand cavalry brigades again went hesitant, which does mean our horse artillery battery on the hill which perhaps shouldn't have fired last turn either, because I've got a feeling they were hesitant, therefore can't fire at long range. So anyway, for sure this time they're hesitant and can't fire at long range. So the Allies had -2 on their leadership test. And for the French, they now have infantry assault off on both of their infantry brigades. They allocated those ADCs, and they were more lucky than the Allies, and all their brigades are active. So that'll be movement first. I don't think there'll be any charges. So the French continue to drive their attack forward. All right, quite a lot of movement here in turn 2. So the French heavy cavalry here has continued thundering forward. They're now reaching the base of the ridge. In response, these Brunswickers behind these trees here form square. The 3rd Battalion in the Brunswick formation has formed itself into a column. If we go up here, we can see that the Brunswick cavalry has, the right-hand brigade has moved forward to potentially fill this gap. They're still at the base of the ridge. And the Brunswick Hussar Regiment has moved as well to provide some support for it. As we move across to the centre, we can see the French Dragoons, their elite companies with the red helmets on the right, and the final unit of cuirassiers have again moved forward, and in response the British have formed square. So the 95th Rifles form square behind the hill. This hedge line you can see here is more notional, just to mark the crest. So I've rolled the guns. The guns have pulled back slightly, so that if the French cavalry charge, they will charge against the squares rather than hit the gun lines. So the guns will have moved, so we'll take a penalty. They prolonged backwards, and the Allied infantry moved forward. So the 52nd moved forward from that little hillock just behind it there, into the gap between the two guns, and then formed squares. Being elite, they can move and change formation. So they moved forward in column and then formed square, and the 71st and the 95th formed square. The skirmish green has moved out to the right, away from the cavalry, but able potentially to do some fire against the French. The French infantries continue to progress forward, so this whole brigade from Rise Corps is now on the table. Guns, as I say, haven't moved. This brigade on the right from D'Erlon's corps is moving forward, and the French horse artillery is moving forward because it feels untroubled, having pinned the Allies in square. So this could be quite tough for the Brunswickers on this flank. Right, it's movement done. We'll now do firing in turn 2. French go first. As it was long-range artillery fire and counter-battery fire, so that's at -2. I didn't bother filming it, but for the French it was pretty disastrous. I rolled a double 1 on the first battery, and then a double 1 on the second battery. So that's 1 in 36 times 1 in 36, so that's a pretty uncommon event. I won't try and do that maths in my head. But anyway, all the French artillery is out of ammunition. So not really a huge loss for the French, because counter-battery fire at long range is pretty ineffective. But that'll be a fatigue casualty on both, and out of ammunition. All right, we'll do the return fire. For the Allies, we'll do that on camera because they do have artillery assault. This could be a bit more effective. Okay, so the British guns did move, so it'll be -2 to this roll, but they're firing at effective range against these Dragoons with the possibility of some bounce through as well. So they're all a 9, that goes down to a 7, and they have got 2 bonus casualties. So at effective range, a 7 is 1 casualty, so that'll be 3 casualties against the Dragoons. Takes them up to 4. And a bounce through casualty against the Cuirassiers. So a pretty good shot from that British gun. We'll move on to the next one. The next gun fires at the other Dragoon regiment. We roll a double 1. My gosh, there's a plethora of them. They are also out of ammunition. Their gun crew will go scuttling off to that ammunition wagon. Luckily I put the ammunition wagons and the caissons on the table over here today. So just to remind me, I've moved my artillery crew up to the caissons to remind me that they are out of ammunition. We'll do the same for this right-hand British gun. And the British horse artillery was hesitant, so will not be able to fire at long range. So that's it for firing at the end of this turn 2. We'll move on and do turn 3. All right, for turn 3, the Allies have gained initiative, but it certainly seems a case of déjà vu. So we again put artillery assault on this battery to make sure it can do as much damage as possible on the advancing French. However, again, as a result the 2 British cavalry brigades over there are again hesitant. Brunswickers are all active. For the French, we put our re-rolls on the infantry brigades, because actually I think they're the ones that are going to sway this game. I don't think our cavalry will do the breakthrough against Allied squares. We know just how tough that is. And unfortunately for the French, the right-hand brigade here has gone hesitant, but the big central brigade and the 2 infantry brigades are active. All right, so it'll be movement for the Allies first. Still don't think there'll be any charges for the Allies anyway. We'll be back to see what the French do. So somewhat unlike Ney on the day, the French are being quite cautious. So we've decided with our active heavy cavalry brigade here, we're doing what we want, which is pinning the British squares. And because the British cavalry is hesitant, we have no imperative to try and drive those off. So we're going to stay at this range, which keeps us out of close range of the British artillery, which is helpful. We will continue to take casualties from the British artillery, but we are getting those infantry into square, and we are moving our brigade up on the left. On the centre, we had no choice here. We had to keep this brigade static, but we have deployed our horse artillery battery down here, and they can see the Brunswickers just on their hill. I deem that they are in line of sight. So because the horse artillery have moved up and they're now starting to be on the bottom end of the slope. So they'll be able to fire, and they took advantage of their brigade being hesitant to do the deployment because they don't really suffer as a result an adverse penalty or a delay of having to do that. And we've moved our final brigade up in support. So it'll be no charges, no hand-to-hand combat. It'll just be firing this turn. We'll have some skirmisher fire over there to exchange, but we'll kick off with the Allies opening fire against the Dragoons again. We will go against the Dragoons and the skirmisher cuirassier regiment with bounce through. Again, it's artillery assault at effective range. Let's see how we do. Good result for the British, 666. That's really good. There'll be a special test for that. Destiny test, that's it. That causes 4 casualties on the Dragoons and a 5th because we rolled another 6. Now let's roll the Destiny test for that shot. We roll a 6. So the British artillery can recover a casualty if it's got one. I don't think it has. So even so, that's 5 casualties against the Dragoons, so they are not in a healthy state, and the cuirassiers also take a bounce through casualty. Right, back to fire the 2nd artillery battery, the one to the right of the square. They will fire against this unit of Dragoons. Another good result. We roll a 9 at effective range. That's pretty good. Effective range of 9 is 2 casualties and a discipline test. All right, I'll do the discipline tests on both those units now. Okay, so we'll start with the Far Dragoon Regiment. They're not veterans, the Dragoons, they're just regular troops. They roll a 4. That goes down, doesn't go down at all because they've only got 2 casualties, so they will be unformed. And for the 2nd Dragoon Regiment, which is a large regiment, they roll a 6. That'll be at -2. That'll also be a 4. So both Dragoon regiments are unsettled by their artillery fire, and both have gone unformed. Okay, so firing the horse artillery at the Brunswickers in square, we get 2 combat dice because the massed target that squares represent. This is at an effective range. We roll a 9 and we get 1 extra casualty with that red 6. So 9 at effective range is 2 casualties. So that'll be 3 casualties on the Brunswickers and a discipline test. They roll a 4. That will be unformed. Okay, so for turn 4, the French have initiative. They went for mainly re-rolls on their brigades this turn, so their artillery batteries are still low on ammunition. They're sacrificing that for keeping the momentum of their attack. So they went for re-rolls, and indeed they've got activations on the Cuirassier Brigade this turn, which might have a go against those unformed Brunswickers in square. And the Infantry Brigade in support is also active, as is the one over there. The Central Brigade, because we only got 3 ADCs, didn't have a re-roll and is hesitant, but it'll be reforming anyway. For the Allies, they did get artillery assault off on the gun battery, but these Brunswickers are unfortunately hesitant, the Infantry Brigade. All right, French to go first. Let's see if we do any charges. Okay, so we have charged. So the French cuirassiers have charged this Brunswick square, and they are supported to the flank and rear. The Brunswickers did consider whether they countercharged with their Uhlans as they were charging second, and they can now see these cuirassiers as they crest the top of the ridge. However, they are only reservists going against veterans, and lancers are good, but the only type of troops they're not particularly good against is cuirassiers because they don't get their lance bonus. So it's a tough call, but I I don't think it'll change the result on the charge against the square, and I don't think we're likely to win that charge. So we're going to hold off and see if there's a better moment to counterattack in the future. So that's it for charges. Let's roll the charge results as the cuirassiers try and go in against the Brunswickers. Okay, so this will be a challenging one for the Brunswickers because they are unformed. They don't. That cancels out their bonus of being square. They are hesitant, so that'll be -1. They're being charged by veterans. They can choose to put their general in, which I think we will. So the Brunswickers will put their general into the combat. That'll take it down to +3 because, yeah, as I say, the French get bonuses for being heavy cavalry and for being veterans. All right, so it's a +3 result, +3 modifier on this roll-off, and the French do have 2 supports. The Brunswickers don't. So what have we rolled? Pretty good for the French. We've rolled an 11, and at +3, that goes to 14, and that plays an 8. So we have won by 6, which is usually a pretty decisive result in a charge. So cavalry versus square, yeah, you need to win by at least 6. It's victory. The square is indeed ridden down. The cavalry takes 1 casualty and can choose to charge on. Let's see what they do. Okay, so the French cavalry is going to try and charge on. Let's see how far they go. It'll be 3 more inches because I haven't done the 3-inch into contact move, and then 3d6. Or how do you think you measure it from the point of the charge? Perhaps you do. Anyway, 3d6 from here. Let's see if we can hit that Brunswick column. So that's why we're trying to do it, because those Brunswickers are in column. It's a pretty good roll. We roll a 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12-inch charge on range. Let's measure that, see if we get into another column. I don't know if anyone knows this. So we got a 12-inch charge on, which within about a 1/16 of an inch was just enough to contact this column. I'm intrigued. Do we actually have to get into contact with the column, given that charges stop 3 inches short? I presume we do, and then you just artificially stop them 3 inches short and do the result at that point. So the cavalry get to charge. There can be a defensive volley. In fact, there should have been a defensive volley by the unformed Brunswicker square as well. I will just roll that to see if it caused any casualties, but it feels unlikely that it would have done anything too serious. Unless, of course, I roll a double 6. So let's see how much. No, 7. So that would have been an inferior volley by the Brunswickers. Well, no, it would have been a volley at half effect by the Brunswickers, who were charged. So a 7 standard volley is 2 casualties, half effect is 1 casualty, and they were unformed, so it would be -2. So that makes it down to 1 casualty, half that is none. So the defensive volley from the square that's just been run over would have caused no casualties. Let's do the defensive volley from this column. That's better. They've rolled an 11, that's pretty good. So it'll be 2 casualties and a discipline test on the cuirassiers, and that will impact the charge result. The cuirassiers pass their discipline test, but they do take 2 casualties, the first 2 casualties of the game. So good shooting by the column. We'll now do the charge results as the cuirassiers go into this Brunswicker column. Okay, so this is not quite as overwhelming for the French. They're only at +2 on this one. They've thrown their general in, and I assume the Brunswicker general can't fight again because he was with a unit that has been driven off, and he will have fled to another formation, whereas the French general was attached to the successful unit from its previous charge. So I'm going to play it that way. Again, please let me know if you think I've got that wrong. The French get bonuses again for being heavy cavalry, for charging on, for being veterans. The Brunswickers lose some for being in a hesitant brigade. The French lose because they took 2 casualties charging in, and the Brunswickers do get a bonus for being in a square. So this time it's only +2 to the French, but it'll be a charge result against infantry rather than a square. So let's see how we do. The French do get a re-roll as well. They will re-roll that 2 to a 3. They win by 7, 8, 9 against a 2. Yeah, well, rolling a 2, you're always going to be in dire trouble. They destroy this French column. Oh my gosh, the French have already broken a Brunswicker brigade. Okay, so done the movement. The Brunswickers here have swung round to make sure they're not subject to showing a flank to the cuirassiers and potentially getting a French flank charge themselves off against the cuirassiers next turn. depending on who's getting initiative. Otherwise, the British cavalry, unfortunately, over there was still hesitant. French brigades have moved forward and the dragoons have reformed in the centre, and the French supports over here have moved up. All right, so it'll be French artillery first. We are going to keep firing despite the fact that we're low on ammunition, because we don't want to waste the ADCs on rearming. It takes 2 ADCs and we've only got 4, a maximum of 4 for each French battery. So we're going to fire those. They do get casualty dice because they're firing against British squares. So we will do that. We'll do a couple of long-range shots against the 52nd Light. We roll a 5. That's only half a casualty. And let's see. And we do nothing for the bonus dice. And the half converts. So that's 1 against the 52nd Light. Second battery rolls a 7. It'll be, again, half a casualty, which doesn't convert. And the 2 casualty dice do 2 more. So that's 3. So that's not too bad. 3 against the 52nd. The battery here, although I've deployed it, actually can't deploy till next turn. So it can't fire this turn. It simply moved up. It limbered and moved up to that position. All right, return fire for the British in a second. Once again, the guns will be firing at the dragoons as they continue to be their closest threat. They roll a 10. That's pretty good, and 1 extra casualty. So at effective range, 10 is 3 more casualties against the dragoons. So that's 4 more casualties against the dragoons and a discipline test. So this takes them up to 13. They are a large regiment, so I think they are still there. Let's look up a large regiment. How do I check? This will be a second. This is not great video. Large cavalry regiment gets up to 15 casualties, so they're on 13, so pretty close to breaking point. And that'll be a discipline test at -2. So let's take their discipline test. They roll a 3. That's not great. They will flee and take an extra 1d3 casualties, I think, which will probably kill them off. Yes, it takes an extra 3 casualties. So I think the cavalry are gone. Yeah, the dragoons melt away under the strength of British artillery fire. That'll be a discipline test on that brigade next turn. Didn't think I'd see it happen, but I did. I just rolled for the 2nd British artillery battery. I rolled a double 1. They were already out of ammo. Their crew were up by the caisson, but unfortunately they've completely exhausted their ammo supply. So unfortunately that British artillery battery on the hill is going to have to withdraw from the action. All right, we'll see if the horse artillery is in range. It will fire at one of those French columns. I'll roll just in case it's in range. That's a 3. That will be another fatigue casualty. The artillery is not doing great in this game. All right, so no effect on the French columns, and that's it for shooting. I'll do the skirmishers off screen, but that's it for the artillery this time. Okay, so we're about to start turn 5. We will roll for the ADCs on screen because we've got a couple of important fatigue falter tests. So rolling for the British, they've got 5 brigades, so they get 5 dice. 4 on normal activation, but the 5th is a broken brigade now, the Brunswickers, and they don't get activated. So there are only 4 ADCs for the British. The French have 4 brigades, and the French get 3 ADCs. So the French will allocate 2 dice to their faltering brigade, which is the left-hand heavy cavalry brigade, and they will do their re-roll against their right-hand brigade. So the right-hand brigade goes active. The infantry support with no re-roll is active. The left-hand infantry with no reroll is active. And then importantly for the French, the falter test. Let's see how we do. This is for the heavy cavalry on the left. We roll a 3. So that's a retire result. Do we want to re-roll that? We will, yeah, because anything but a 1 will be better. Whoa, that was nearly a 1. So that's a retire result. So retreating and routed units disperse. All units immediately retire. Lose 1 casualty. The brigade remains faltering. It's not great for the French. That heavy cavalry will be falling back off the table, and the Allied right flank looks secure for the moment. Okay, so the French heavy cavalry brigade is now back here on the table edge, and there's a big hole in the centre of the French attack. All right, let's now roll for the Allies. They have 4 ADCs. We will allocate 2 of those to the Brunswickers, trying to make sure that 1 battalion stays on the table. I don't know, I'm not sure it's worth the reroll, but I don't think we've got too much else critical to put the reroll on. We'll... it's already a broken brigade, is it worth it? We want the initiative so we can try some charges against the French over here. I think we will go for 3 rerolls and only put 1 roll on the Brunswickers, wise or not. Okay, so we're going to put a reroll on our 3 cavalry brigades. So starting with the Brunswickers, they need that reroll. They are active. The light cavalry brigade in the centre is active. The left cavalry brigade is active. That's really good for the British. Then the British artillery in the centre is hesitant. And then the Falter test on the Brunswickers is a 6. So that's good. They will stay. They are obey orders. So that Brunswicker square stays intact. And both armies are a -1 on rolling for initiative, but the French had it last turn. French get a 9. They do get initiative. That's good. They're not going to get charged in the flank by the Brunswick cavalry. Gives a chance for their cavalry again to go into action. Let's see how we do as we move into turn 5. Some reserves are available for the British. I think a KGL brigade is available. And we'll see how this game pans out. Turn 5 next. Okay, so here we are starting turn 9, and the French have initiative. So it'll be French charges first. Let's see what they can do with their heavy cavalry in this corner. Okay, so starting with the charges on turn 5, we've seen a small charge on the left just to clear away the Allied skirmishers. They passed their discipline test and fell back before the charging French column on the far left. Then over on the right, the more impactful charges. The cuirassiers were able to will the necessary 6 inches to bring the charge arc in on the right-hand unit of Brunswick Hussars, and the cuirassiers here were able to wheel past the square and just get round and crash into the lancers here. So 2 charges to go off. We'll start with the one on the left first. We get some passing fire from the Brunswick square at the cuirassiers as they thunder past them. This will be at half effect. That's a pretty good shot. That's a 10. This will be a standard volley. That'll be 2 casualties on the cuirassiers and a discipline test. Let's see what we can do. Wow, 5. That, unfortunately for them, I think makes them go unformed, which will not help their charge result. Great shooting there by that Brunswick square. Okay, so that really does sweat. So the cuirassiers here are on a straight roll off, and if the Brunswickers throw their general in, they can have a +1 on this attack. Now the cuirassiers will get a reroll because both cuirassier attacks have got supports. So I think we will throw our command in here. Let's see if we can cause a bit of a shock. All right, let's roll this. This will be +1 to the Allies. Okay, no, it doesn't look great. So we're on an 8 against a 5. +1 to the Allies makes that a win for the cavalry, but the chasseurs by 2. So they will melee. They need to get a win by 3 to melee with a lan. Yep, so we will re-roll that 3. Let's see what we can get. That's the same. So straight into melee, but the cuirassiers will be unformed fighting those lancers. Okay, so rolling for the second combat. This will be a straight +2 to the French, as in this one, they're not unformed. French get a 6, the Allies get an 8. So the French will re-roll that 2 for their supports. So 1. So an 8 plays a 5, that's a -3. So the attacker melees unformed and the defender countercharges and melees with a lan. So not all lost on this flank. Let's see how that combat goes later in the turn. Okay, French firing, so they're not giving up on this flank. They're going to open fire with their horse artillery battery. It's unlimbered this turn, so that'll be at -2. But this will be canister at close range against the Brunswickers, who are in square. So that'll be 2 extra combat dice for this shot. Not great. So the French roll a 5 at close range is 1 casualty. That's 2 casualties on the Brunswickers. Right, and then we will fire the French skirmish screen at the Allied guns up on the hill, just over here. And we cause no casualties. And then we've got a similar French skirmish screen going against the horse artillery battery, which causes 2 casualties. Back in a sec. Okay, and now our heavy artillery battery will fire at long range against the Allied square on the hill. So they roll a double 6. That's pretty good. That's 3 casualties plus an extra one, so that's 4 casualties. And a discipline test against the 52nd. And then the second round does a 4, which is nothing but 2 more casualties. So that's 6 and a discipline test. We'll be back in a sec. Okay, the Allies now opening fire at this infantry battalion down here with their guns effective range. That's a 5. That'll just be 1 casualty against the French. I'll mark that up in a second. There, our horse artillery battery will also open fire at short range going through these skirmishers. That's an 8 at short range. It's 3 casualties and a discipline test. First one will be on the skirmishers. So this will be a test at -1. Let's see what the French do. They roll 8. So that's all right. They will survive and stay formed. I think it's the French artillery fire and Allies artillery fire and skirmishers done. That's the end of turn 5. We'll move on with turn 6. Having completed the firing, of course, we've got to do the hand-to-hand combat. So we'll start down here with the Brunswick Hussars fighting these French cuirassiers. So the Hussars have elan and the French are unformed. So this will be a more closer combat result than it might appear at first blush. Let's see what the modifiers are. Okay, so this will be a close one. It's a straight roll-off. The French get modifiers for being veterans, and heavy cavalry, the Allies, get modifiers, or those are offset by the fact that the French are unformed. So let's see how we do. All right, pretty good roll for the Allies. That's, 4 casualties for the Allies, and wow, only 1 for the cuirassiers. So the Brunswick Hussars win by 3. They're going to drive those cuirassiers back. Okay, so this one also will be another straight roll-off, although in this case the Brunswickers don't have elan. They have the benefit of being a large unit, so that will give them a bonus dice. So it's still 6 dice to 6. Let's see how we do in this combat. Wow, another great performance by the Brunswickers. They really are seeking revenge for the death of the Duke of Brunswick 2 days earlier at Quatre Bras. But the French also did well, so the Brunswickers only won that by 1. So take the ground, and the cuirassiers are forced to retreat, and they will burst back through those supporting carabiniers and unform them as they do. Okay, so here we are. Absolutely tremendous performance by the Brunswick light cavalry driving off those unformed regiments of cuirassiers. So really that defending volley from that square, unforming the cuirassiers on the left, really paid dividends. And actually more of a tragedy for the French. Their brigadier was killed as they fell back from the Uhlans, pierced by a lance. So we have a falter test as well on the cuirassier heavy cavalry division. So that's going to be a tough one for the French, as they have 2 faltering brigades now, both their heavy cavalry brigades. My gosh, we could be coming to an early resolution. Let's see how this goes as we complete turn 5 and roll for ADCs in turn 6. Okay, so as this is such an important roll, let's roll for ADCs on camera. The French have 4 and the Allies now have 6 brigades, but one of those will be activated on a 5 because of its broken status. But the KGL is now, as you might have seen, on table behind the Brunswickers, providing some backup. So let's roll the initial ones, and this one will need a 5. When indeed we rolled a 6. So the Allies have 5 ADCs, the French have 3. Well, we're clearly going to have to allocate those to our cavalry brigades. So let's make those choices. I think we'll put the rerolls on the cavalry brigade on the right, as they're in the most offensive position. Put the other one on the left, and we'll roll for the Allies first, as they're in a better state. So let's roll for the... Well, French want the Allies want initiative, because I want my Brunswick cavalry to try and charge into these disordered French formations milling about on the top of the ridge, try and throw them back and turn the tide of the battle. So we're going to go for re-rolls on our 3 cavalry brigades and our 2 infantry brigades, try and help get to that initiative roll. So Brunswick Cavalry is active. The British Light Cavalry with its re-roll is active. There we go. The other British Cavalry Brigade is active. Right-hand British Infantry Brigade is active. Left-hand Infantry Brigade with its re-roll is hesitant, so that's -1 for the British. Alright, now let's roll for the French activations. Their right-hand brigade with nothing is hesitant. Their left-hand brigade is hesitant. Wow, this is not boding well for the French. Alright, let's do the first falter test then. So this is for our heavy cavalry that were falling back last turn. We roll a 6, they obey orders, that's good news, so we've got that heavy cavalry back. Right, now this one on the right, we do have a re-roll here. We roll a 3, that's a retire. That might not be all bad because we are going to get charged. So I think we might stick with that retire result and fall back before the advancing British. We've got a couple of turns yet to save this heavy cavalry brigade, and I think it'll be worse to be hit by the charging cavalry. So we will accept that retire and we will not do the re-roll for the French. All right, I was just reading the retire results, and routing and retreated units disperse. So that would mean this brigade is essentially broken, as we'd have lost 2 of our regular sized cuirassier units and only have 2 small carabinier units left, as the right hand unit is routing and the left hand one is retreating. So I think we are going to have a re-roll. Let's see what we get. We get a 6. Well, that's at least an active brigade. So the French have 2 active brigades and 2 hesitant. The Allies have 1 hesitant. So this will be a +1 roll on the initiative for the Allies. The French get a 6. The Allies get a 5 with +1 on the Allies. That's 6-6. So that's a draw. So the initiative stays with the French. All right. Let's see what happens. Charges to declare. Don't think there's any of those for the French because their infantry brigades are both hesitant and the cavalry up here is all unformed. So it'll be charges for the Allies. Alright, so this will be +1 for the Brunswickers for their charge going in here. They get the +1 because they are double the width, and the French are suffering from being unformed. Alright, let's see how we do. Oh wow, French do well. They win this charge result. They've won it by at least 6, so it's a -6 result. So the defenders will stand and the Brunswickers retreat and take 1d3 casualties. So the Brunswickers actually take 3 casualties. Their glory ride comes to a halt, and the French Carabiniers stand at the top of the ridge. Okay, so with the Carabiniers having rolled a double 6, there'll be a destiny test, and there will also be a risk to general test, as the Brunswicker Brigadier was involved in the combat. The 8 means there's no risk to general, but let's roll a destiny test for the Carabiniers. They roll a 9, so they can reform or change formation or melee with a LAN. So we will reform them from their unformed state. Okay, so now we'll do the charge results down on the right-hand combat. So again, let's just have a look at the modifiers. So the French get +1 for being heavy cavalry and +1 for being veterans. That takes them up to +2, but they lose that for being unformed. They have no casualties. The Hussars, let's just check their casualty status. They've only taken 1 casualty, so they will have no effect from that. They don't have a general. They are they're not double the width or anything like that. So this one looks like this will be just a straight roll off. Let's see how we do. Okay, again, another good result for the French. So that initial impetus from the Brunswickers has come to naught. So the French have won that one only by 5 this time. So the attackers will melee unformed, and the Carabiniers countercharge. They melee with a LAN, but they are also unformed. Right, this time starting on the Allied right flank. This brigade is hesitant, so hasn't been able to move forward, but we did form this left-hand battalion into square, partly in response to the threat of the Allied cavalry moving forward, which they have done round this flank, and indeed the Allied cavalry in the centre has moved forward to potentially exploit this gap, but it will need a redeploy order to do that as it's changing its position relative to other brigades. The French cavalry down here, which is on obey orders, has resumed its advance back to threaten the centre, but with the Allies temporarily gone, the British infantry has reformed a line against the edge of the road here and pulled back its other brigade that was in the square in the centre of the crossroads, taking too many casualties. The KGL squares have moved forward slightly, and over on the right, the mass of French heavy cavalry on the top of the ridge has reformed itself so it can revisit its advance. All right, we'll start with French artillery. So first our horse artillery will unleash against this poor Brunswick square that's in front of it. Again, another terrible roll by this horse artillery battery. That will be nothing for close range. Well, half a casualty perhaps. See if that comes through. No, not even half a casualty. So terrible results there, should be hammering that square. The French skirmishers will have a go against the Allied artillery battery, and we cause 2 casualties against the Allied artillery. Then the French heavy artillery will go against the 95th Rifle square, which they can see, which is still pinned by the French heavy cavalry. So that will be at long range, but they do get the bonus for a square as a target. So that's at long range, but that's an 11. That's 2 casualties, 1 more with the artillery dice, so that's 3 casualties, and a discipline test against the 95th Rifles. Let's do the discipline test. They are fine. So that was 3 casualties against the 95th Rifles, which we will mark up in a second. And then the 2nd French artillery battery will go against the 71st Scottish that are in line further along the ridge. They roll a 9. They don't get any artillery dice despite the fact I rolled them. That's 1 casualty and a discipline test. Let's roll a discipline test for the British. They are fine, but that's 1 casualty against the British over there. And then finally the French skirmish screen will open up against the horse artillery battery. They get 3 dice and they cause 1 casualty against the horse artillery. Right, I'll mark those up and then do the British return fire. So first and most damagingly, the British horse artillery right over there. You might just see, you probably can't, just behind that tree, can open fire against the French square that's had to form for defensive purposes. Let's see if they can do any better than their French colleagues did. Not remarkably, they got 6. Close range is 2 casualties and 2 extra from the combat dice, so that's 4 casualties on the square. Remember that. Then the French the 95th Rifles will open fire at the French skirmishers and cause 2 more casualties, which will be a base loss against the French skirmishers from memory. Then the 71st will open fire with a volley. Let's just check those ranges and have a look at their target. Okay, so the 71st here will open fire against that attacking French column. Let's see what we get. A 10, that's very good. So that's going to be a superior volley. That's 5 casualties and a discipline test on the French. Okay, that's the first bit of firing. Then the artillery battery here on the hillside, the foot artillery battery, will open fire against this closest French column. It's at effective range, so they get 1 combat dice for that. They're all 4. That's not great. At effective range is nothing, but the combat dice does cause 1 casualty against the column. And the 95th Rifles can't fire anything. The Brunswick Square can fire again. It's got a target within 3 inches. We'll go at the Carabiniers. This will be at half effect. Oh, they do well again. A 10. A standard volley is 2 casualties and a discipline test. Let's see whether the French can pass their discipline test this time. No, they can't. They go unformed again. That square, despite its status, is performing remarkably well. Right, so this one actually having got to combat, the +2 dice for heavy cavalry really might tell here. So it's 7 dice to 4, I think, in favour of the French. Let's see how this combat turns out. Pretty good for the French. That's 4 casualties and only 1 for the Brunswickers. I think the Brunswickers will rout and be driven off the table, and that'll be a faltering brigade. I think we will leave the French to rally in place. Okay, so we've got 3 ADCs for the Allies, and for our Hester Brigade, we'll get another one. All right, so 4 ADCs for the Allies. We're going to put 2 as redeploys on our Light Cavalry Brigade in the centre to try and move that into the action, because I think it's important the Allies try and get some counter-attacking momentum. And we'll allocate 2 ADCs to the Brunswickers. Everything else will be its raw rolls. So, rolling for the square. No, that is hesitant. All right, rolling for the KGL. They are hesitant. Rolling for the British Light Brigade in the centre. They are active. The British Heavy Cavalry are active. And then the redeployment of our Light Cavalry is a go. Okay, and then we've got our falter test. We do have a reroll on this. We roll a 2. That will be a fallback. We roll again. A 6. Obey orders. So the Brunswick Lancers are still available for action, but we're on -2 for the Allies for the initiative test. For the French, we have 3 ADCs. We're going to allocate them 2 to our cavalry brigades and 1 to our right-hand infantry brigade. So right-hand cavalry brigade is active. Left-hand cavalry brigade with its reroll is active. Right-hand infantry brigade is active. Left-hand infantry brigade is active. All right. So the French, all the French brigades are active, and the French are at +2 on the initiative roll, which they get. French have initiative as we start turn 7. Okay, so turn 7 has definitely been a turn of manoeuvre. The French are starting to dominate this right-hand end of the ridge between La Haisson and the Hougoumont Woods. So French heavy cavalry has penetrated the Allied defensive line, is now looking to attack the flank of the Allied position, forcing those KGL battalions that had come onto the table to remain in square. The Brunswickers still are desperately hanging on after 2 atrocious turns of firing by this French horse artillery battery. Hopefully it can do some damage this turn and not have its carabinier colleagues again disordered by far from that square. They again chose not to charge because all the Allied targets ahead of them are in square, but the French infantry is now closing to be able to do some assaults this turn, and its skirmish screen is putting French pressure on that remaining Allied artillery battery behind the hedge line. In the centre, the French heavy cavalry once more is moving up to the ridge, and the British light cavalry is moving forward to oppose it. The Brunswickers have reformed in the rear there, but are really cramped for space. On the far right flank, you can see a British heavy and light dragoon regiment outflanking move starting to take place, and those far left French battalions have had to form square in front of the Allied guns, which is not great, to avoid being charged. So very much manoeuvres this turn. We'll do the firing, and I'll come back with a summary of where that gets us to. Okay, so French long-range artillery fire didn't do much, and the skirmishers have exchanged a couple of casualties. The only thing of note is the Allied horse artillery battery on that far hill is now on 5 casualties, so it needs to think about pulling itself back. It's taken a lot of casualty from the French skirmishers, and if it takes 8, it will break, and that will cause a falter test on the Allies, which they want to avoid. All right, we'll do the firing though. Let's do a close range shot against that square that's in front of it by that artillery battery. We'll be on -1, and because it's firing through skirmishers, actually it will also... actually, I think it might even have to fire at the skirmishers. Let me just check the range over there, but I think they're more than 3 inches distance from that square, and they can therefore screen it. So this is firing at the skirmishers, so that'll be -3. And no combat dice, so nothing. So they are now low on ammunition as well. So that's not great. We'll have to send that crew off to the ammunition wagon to remind ourselves for that. All right, then we'll fire this Allied artillery battery in the centre. It's going to fire at the dragoons. Now it's going to fire at this column. Column or dragoons, which is the closest threat? I think we're going to fire at the column because the dragoons are faced off by the Allied artillery. That's a 6 for close range is 2 casualties, but the skirmish screen will take the first one of those. So 1 on the column and 1 on the skirmish screen. And then finally, is the powder dry yet? How will the French do? Close range against the Brunswick square. Can we do any better this time? Doesn't look like it. A 5. At close range is 1 casualty and 1 extra for the combat dice. So that square is still hanging in there. Okay, so as we move into turn 8, the Allies have regained the initiative. The French put artillery assault on the horse artillery battery to try and take out the Brunswick square. They will be getting plenty of bonus dice. Otherwise, all brigades are active on both sides, apart from the left-hand French infantry brigade. So it'll be Allies to go first with Allied charges. Expect to see some cavalry moving. Okay, charges. So the first of the French infantry brigades brought up to support Ney's attack on the ridge are crashing into the 95th Rifles. They will get some supporting fire as that artillery battery is within 3 inches, but the casualties will be shared with the 2 French supporting units. So let's do the defensive fire first. The artillery battery will fire first. It's firing at close range. We roll a 6. Close range, and they will get a combat dice because they're firing against columns, so they do get an extra casualty. So a 6 at close range is 2 casualties, so that's 3 casualties so far on the attacking French forces. 1 of which will go on the skirmisher screen. And then we do the defensive volley from the 95th Rifles. They are veterans, so this will be a superior volley, but it'll be a half effect because we're firing into a square from a square. That's a 9 for a superior volley, is 2 casualties and a discipline test. So we're up to 5 casualties now, and a discipline test on the French. Let's allocate those and do the discipline test. So I think I've got this right. Because the artillery was effectively firing through that skirmish screen, it took the first of the 5 casualties against the skirmish screen, which left 4 to allocate between these 3 units. The majority have to go to the lead attacking unit. So it takes 2, and the other 2 battalions have taken 1. So that attacking battalion has taken 1 casualty as a result of the charge, and I think that's what we do the charge test on. So let's do the charge results now as they charge into that square. Oh, they're going to do a discipline test first, because the square did cause a discipline test. This will be at -1. They roll a 7, so they do go unformed, which bodes well for the 95th Rifles. All right, let's do that charge result. Okay, so given that they've unformed the French, this should go pretty well for the Allies. They are on +2 for the 95th Rifles. 95th Rifles roll a 9, the French roll a 6. The French will try and re-roll one of the 3s. They get a 6, all right, and then they will use that other support to re-roll the other 3. A double 6. It's not a natural double 6, so that won't cause a destiny test, but it does mean that they have won by 5. So that's a pretty good result, although it was +2 to the Allies. So rather than winning by 5, they win by 3. So the French will melee with the Lan, and the 95th Rifles go unformed. All right, next charge result will be this melee in the centre as the French and British dragoons go into one another. Let's have a look at that one. Okay, so this one is going to be a straight roll off. The French benefiting from attaching their general, as do the Allies, but otherwise no other modifiers. So let's see how we do. In fact, the Allies are veterans, so actually this will be +1 to the Allies. The Allies get an 8, the French get an 8. Both will re-roll their 2s. Well, the French get a 6, so that means that they win by 1. So there will just be a straight melee in the centre there. All right, that's it as a result of charge results. We'll do normal movement and then move on to firing. All right, firing pretty much done in turn 8. That French square in the corner, unfortunately, has gone unformed. It took 4 casualties from the Allied artillery battery on the hill. but the artillery battery itself is going to have to pull back. It's now taken 7 casualties as a result of the French skirmisher fire. A couple of these other battalions are also weakened by the fire from the 95th Rifles and the 71st Highlanders on the hill. In the centre here, this battery also has taken significant casualties, up to 5 now, so it's also struggling. We'll do one more set of firing on camera. So we will fire our horse artillery for the 4th time at this square. Can it do any better? Yes, at last. It's done a 9 and it's got 3 bonus casualties. So at close range a 9 is, so that's 6 casualties and a discipline test. So this will be a discipline test at -2 on the Brunswickers. How do we do? They roll a 3. They retreat and take another 1d3 casualties. So that's 3 more casualties on top of 6, I think that was. So that's 9 more casualties. Probably the end of that battalion. Okay, so with the Brunswickers finally removed from the hill, we'll now move on to the hand-to-hand combat. So we'll start down here with the 95th Rifles against the charging French column. Let's see how we do in this hand-to-hand combat. Okay, so the 95th Rifles have the advantage of 1 dice. So let's see how we do. So the French cause 2 casualties, 95th Rifles cause 4. They will throw those attacking Frenchmen back off the ridge. Again, this crucial combat in the centre is very much equal. The Allies benefit from being veterans, but the French are a large unit. Let's see how we do. So the French cause 3 casualties, the Allies cause 4. The Allies are doing well in this round, so they take the ground and the losers retreat and unform their supports. Alright, so turn 9 could be potentially decisive for the British. Their flanking Allied cavalry brigade is threatening again this French heavy brigade that's already lost one of its regiments. In the centre, on the right here, the French are in a good dominant position, but need to move up and break some more of the Allies. Their last attack did not succeed. So still very much in the balance, and the French look a bit pinned there on their right. But again, the Allies have to think about pulling their artillery back if it's not going to be broken. So initiative again feels very important this turn. Let's roll for that and see how we allocate our ADCs. Okay, so no special orders this turn. Everyone was going for initiative and had re-rolls allocated. The only unit to be hesitant is the British light cavalry in the centre. So charges. The Allies get to go first. Could see some devastating stuff from this Allied flanking light cavalry brigade. Let's see where it goes. Okay, so this looks like a critical turn for the game. The French Carabiniers have charged into the shaken 95th Rifles square, see if they can break it, and then they get a potential charge on to the artillery battery, which will automatically collapse, being hit in the flank by cavalry, and then potentially into the flank of the 52nd Rifles, 52nd Light, which would not be good. However, it's not all good for the French over here. The British Dragoon Regiment has charged into the flank of these unformed cuirassiers and Dragoons, so that will not be good. Let's do the charge results. We'll start over here with the cavalry combat first. Okay, so this is looking a disaster for the French. The British remnants of their heavy cavalry brigade formed up into this unit here have crashed into the flank of those unformed Dragoons, and it is at no less than +11 to the British. Oh, funnily enough, they've won. That'll be victory, and they drive through their opponents there. All right, let's do their charge on. So you get to charge on 5d6. That's a pretty good result. That's 10, 20, 22 inches. So let's apply those results. Right, one of the nuances in the rules I often forget. So I've cleared out the Dragoons. They've had to retreat 21 inches, so they're routing right down here. If they don't have the opportunity to form up behind another unit and they're routing, they just disperse, I believe. So that's the end of those French Dragoons. And we get to do the charge on, which will be into the rear of some of these unformed French infantry, up to 22 inches. Let's see how far they can go. Okay, so the British heavy cavalry do charge on. They have to, in fact, but they will go unformed and they crash into this French column. Let's just measure that distance, make sure they have a chance or not to form square. Yep, they do. It's 14 inches, so we'll have a go at forming square. They roll a 3. They fail. that becomes a retreat result. They flee before those oncoming French cavalry. And now the British heavy dragoons charge into this French column. It's not looking good. Let's see how they do. I don't know whether you'll be able to do a discipline test, because you can't change formation when you're unformed. So I don't believe they get a chance to form a square. So we'll just have to roll the charge results as it is. The real problem for the Allies here is the fact that they're flanked. So this is a +8 die roll for the lifeguards going in. Well, my gosh, +8, that just makes it a draw. So cavalry versus infantry. My gosh, I think cavalry versus infantry. The cavalry retire. They take 1 casualty and the defenders stand. So this part of the Allied attack has caused pretty serious damage, but has stopped at that point. We've still got the 2nd regiment to do though. Alright, so the cuirassiers have got a better chance on this one. This is simply +5 to the British, basically the flanking bonus. Well, that's it. That's the end of the cuirassiers. So +5 on to 9 is 14 against 5. They've won by 9. So victory, the defenders rout and take 1d6 casualties. And again, because there's nothing to flee back behind, I think those cuirassiers disperse. Let's see how far the charge on is. Again, it'll be 5d6. Pretty good roll. Sorry, my cable was just tied up in a flag. So that's 10, 16, 22, 23 inches. So slightly further than the last one. All right, let's do that. It's a game with lots of questions today. So the British cavalry here have charged on, and they've actually pretty much their only viable target is the same infantry battalion that the other ones charged into. I assume you can, because you do these things in turn, and therefore it's still an eligible target. So we'll work this one out and see how we do in this one. Okay, so this battalion, and I don't know whether I didn't notice it last time, has 9 casualties. So this is +6 to the Allies in terms of the charge. So that's 13 against 6, so they win by 6. So they destroy that battalion, can continue their charge on into this final unformed French battalion. Okay, and this final turn by the Allies also at +5. Let's see how we do. All right, not so good. +5 takes us up to 11 against 11. So that will be a cavalry versus infantry. Cavalry retire with 1 casualty, so they fall back like their colleagues, and the defenders stand. On a draw, the defenders do take a casualty as well. Okay, so it looks like it's all going the way of the Allies. The 95th Rifles, living up to their reputation despite being unformed, got off a good quality volley and took out a whole bunch of the attacking Carabiniers. They've now gone unformed themselves and took 3 casualties in the charge. So this will swing the charge result, hopefully, in the 95th Rifles' favour. Certainly they think so. All right, let's do the charge result. This is actually at +3 to the 95th Rifles. Yep, they roll a 10. That's a really good result. They've won by at least 6. So cavalry versus square. Cavalry retire with 1 casualty, and the square also takes a casualty. And that will unform their supports nearby. Okay, so where are we at the end of turn 9? Well, we still have our part of our grand battery still safely deployed here, but vulnerable now because we have an Allied cavalry brigade in the French rear, although it is reforming next turn. We have a French infantry brigade about to assault the ridgeline here, and actually most of their opposition has fallen away as the Allied horse artillery battery has had to pull back, and the cavalry that were threatening it there have moved. In the centre we have another Allied cavalry brigade, all reformed, ready for deployment. It's keeping one of those battalions in square, but otherwise not. And the 52nd, I think, 52nd Light have moved forward, the Oxfordshires, to fill that gap. Over here, the KGL are squeezing the space that this French heavy cavalry brigade has got to deploy in. It's got its guns on the ridge, which are a threat and will cause some damage. But this brigade's got to take a Falter test, and of course we lost the other French heavy cavalry brigade this turn to being hit in the flank by those Allied cavalry. So a Falter test to do for the French, and we'll see how we get going as we start turn 10 of this pretty dramatic game. Okay, so we're just doing French activation, and we've had a bit of a tragedy. The French heavy cavalry brigade here has gone hesitant. That's despite them having a re-roll, and I had put artillery assault on their artillery battery as well to try and ease their way in for this cavalry to attack. That means no charges this turn and a chance for the 95th Rifles to reform, which is not good. Down here we do have 2 dice to do the Falter test on this brigade, so let's see what we get. We've rolled a 6, they obey orders. Alright, well that's not a bad start, and at least they're active. But the other French brigade on the far side that was ready for an assault against the 71st line, light, also has gone hesitant, so not good. Let's roll for the Allies. We've got 4 dice. We're going to put re-rolls on all of the brigades, so starting with the light cavalry, they're in the open. With their re-roll, they are active. The light cavalry in the centre are active. The light infantry brigade is active. The KGL with their re-roll are active, and then finally the Brunswick cavalry are also active. So all active for the Allies. Let's roll for initiative then and see how we do. Okay, 7 places 5, so we had 2 inactive French brigades, so they go from a 7 down to a 5, so that's 5-5. French had initiative last turn, so French keep initiative. There's not an awful lot for them to do this turn. Right, turn 10 was very much reforming all of the troops. The Allies have moved some of their light cavalry into the centre, reformed their heavier cavalry brigade over there. They exchanged fire and drove off some of the French who were approaching their line on the right, redeployed their Brunswickers slightly, and otherwise very much nothing moved here. For the French, again, reforming all their troops, getting the artillery ready to put some more pressure on the 95th Rifles, reforming these battalions down here. The French have initiative, and we'll have a go at declaring some charges, I imagine, as we start turn 11. Okay, so the Carabiniers charged the Hussars, supported by the Cuirassiers, and then the 23rd Light Dragoons decided that their best option was to countercharge the Cuirassiers. So got a bit of a cavalry melee going on in the centre. Let's see how this one plays out. Okay, so both sides have committed their commanders, and this is a +1 to the French. No one's got supports. Both sides are all a 5, so the French will win by 1. So it'll be a straight melee in the centre for this one. And let's roll the second one. So they are heavy cavalry. Both sides are veterans. And so again, it'll simply be +1 to the French, I think. Let's pick up the dice, see what we get here. Cuirassiers against the 23rd Light Dragoons, again, just a melee. So straight into melee in the centre for both those units, and now on with normal movement. French to go first. Okay, so defensive fire from the Allies continues to hammer away at this French brigade that's approaching the 71st Light. So they're not really making any progress, another battalion driven off. The French stepped back and swung round to threaten the Allies did, threaten the French Grand Battery and put pressure on this brigade from the rear. Otherwise, the French battalions here moved forward. These French heavy cavalry are still pinning the KGL to stop them retaking the ridgeline and allowing the artillery battery to continue to put pressure on the 95th Rifles, but again, didn't do very much. So now we're on to the crunch, the cavalry combat in the centre of the table. Let's start with the Cuirassiers. So they have taken 9 casualties, so they're not in great state. They are heavy cavalry, that will give them 2 bonus dice. They're not a large unit, neither side is large or small. They're both veterans, so we don't get bonus for that. They lose 2 dice for the 9 casualties, and the 23rd Light Dragoons don't lose any. And that's it, so it's 5 all. Let's see how we do. Okay, so the Allies do 2 casualties, the Cuirassiers do 2 casualties. So I think we get to fight a second round. Okay, so we do get the option to fight on. The defender chooses first. So I could choose to withdraw my cuirassiers. They've taken 11 casualties now, so one more will be a wipeout. So actually I think I might retire, which will allow the light dragoons to take the ground unformed, even though we would have an advantage in the next round of combat by 1 dice. The light dragoons only have to do 1 more casualty to cause a fall to test on this brigade. So cuirassiers are in a very weak position here, so they are indeed going to retire. The second combat has a small advantage for the Carabineers, them being heavy cavalry, although their small unit status reduces the benefit of that somewhat. And that's a terrible roll for the Carabineers. They only caused 1 casualty and the Allies have caused 3. So the Allies will win this combat. Okay, so this is turn 12 and the Allies have got the initiative, but unfortunately their cavalry brigade over here is hesitant. We'll see what the rest of they can do, so it'll be charges to kick off in turn 12. So the British are still keeping the pressure on, so the 71st Light have charged this battalion of French troops that are just stationary in column underneath their position. They've been supported by the 52nd Oxfordshire, and down here the 23rd Light Dragoons have decided to charge this column. It doesn't have the option of forming square as it's too close. So we'll start with the column first. We get a defensive volley by the French. This will be at half effect, and they roll an 8, which won't be fabulous, not too bad. And 8 for a standard volley is 1 casualty on the 71st, so not enough to slow them down. All right, let's do the charge result. Okay, so it will be a straight re-roll, roll-off, as the British, although they are veterans, lose that advantage because of the number of casualties. Both sides get a re-roll. Both sides have rolled a 9. We'll both re-roll the 3s. Let's see how this one goes. -1. So the attacker stops and volleys. Standard column, so that'll be 3 dice. And see how we do. Not bad. 2 casualties against the French, and we are both out in the open. All right, and the 23rd Light Dragoons coming in here against this French infantry battalion. The defensive volley caused 1 casualty on the 23rd Light Dragoons, not enough to stop them. And that will be a modifier of -1 because of their cumulative casualties. So it's +1 for being veterans. Neither side is unformed. The infantry get +2 for being in column. But they have taken 7 casualties, so that goes down to +1. So I think that's it. Simply +1 to the French. Let's see if they can repel the 23rd Dragoons. Not like that. So the 23rd Dragoons get a 10 modified down to a 9, so they win by 2. Cavalry versus infantry. They will melee with a LAN, and the French melee unformed. Again, not much firing this turn. We fired the French horse artillery against the square of the 95th Rifles. Actually, there should be 2 combat dice that we didn't roll, which don't cause any casualties. So still pretty much stalemate down here, although the 95th have now taken 8 casualties. Otherwise, we've moved the Hussars back up in support, and we'll go on and do the combat down here. All right, let's see how we do. All right, British have a small advantage in this one, and they cause 2 casualties to 1. So how do they do? Cavalry versus infantry. Infantry retreat, and the cavalry return to their own lines. All right, the infantry again are thrown back in this brigade. All right, turn 13, and we're going to call it. So the Allies have 1 initiative, turn 13, and they got enough activations, and indeed managed to activate this cavalry brigade over here, which was in a devastating position. So this unit of dragoons has charged into the flank of the 12-pounders. It will break through, and it will go 5d6. It's an automatic victory, even though that's a pretty terrible roll. It's only, what, 9, 10, 11, 12 inches. 12 inches would be enough to take it into the 2nd battery. So both those batteries will be wiped out. They're also going into the rear of this column here, which didn't have time to form square because they were too close. And they were unformed last turn, so they weren't able to form into square. They were simply able to form up. So there'll be a huge advantage for a rear charge and an almost certain breakthrough against that battalion, and then possibly the one in front, and indeed the one in front. So a real cavalry, another devastating Allied cavalry charge expected there. Otherwise, everything over here is pretty much stalemate. This French brigade is in pretty weak state, 9 casualties, 4 casualties, and 1 on the front battalion, so that's not too bad. But this element of the heavy dragoons, heavy cuirassier division has taken 11 and 9 casualties, so that's on the point of breaking and is no longer deployable. This one over here is at 50% strength, but it's not going to break through against those 3 squares before the French lose the other flank totally. So, unlike the last game, when the Allies were positively trounced, the Allies have pulled it off. It really was down to the flanking by the Allied cavalry and this brigade down here, and the fact that the French had committed all of their heavy cavalry, and just the timing was perfect, catching that heavy cavalry brigade, which was penciled in to deal with them, in the flank as they were unformed, really turned the battle in favour of the Allies. Anyway, I hope you enjoyed this game. It's a really long one, so I hope you've persevered to the end. Let me know whether you enjoyed it. Leave us a comment, and hopefully see you all next time. Cheers, everyone. Have a good weekend.